Okay, so hopefully you can see my screen still, and you can see now we're in the software. And I'm going to walk you through a few components to the software. And in each of these components, what we'll do is I'll ask you to definitely ask me questions and follow up with any comments that you have. What resonates or works with you in terms of how you're seeing this. The first piece that I'm going to show you is part of our prioritization toolkit. And the prioritization toolkit has multiple methods for allowing you to prioritize your requirements. And this is just one of those examples. This is the more sophisticated way of doing that. And what you're looking at is it's a sample Air Force wing. What you can see here on the screen in this term, generic term of alternatives, these are typically your requirements, or they could be your, so for example, they could be your UFR list, or they could be your requirements at large. And then you can see the requirement request amount for these, as well as a ranking, if you will, of these particular requirements. Here's a cut line here, and we can talk about that in just a minute. Now, in this particular case with this wing, they had several lines of effort that they wanted to prioritize their UFR list against. And those lines of effort were based on their particular wing, but these are all configurable. So for example, in this case with improve aircrew organization efforts, enhance aircrew training practices, equip aircrews, that's all configurable. Another wing that we work with, the 316th, formerly the 11th wing at AFDW, have basically set this up as the major graded areas, if you're familiar with those. Or the 10th wing at Air Force Academy used their lines of effort. They had 5 lines of effort that they used, but they could be either lines of effort or criteria, whatever you would use to really rank your requirements. And the former comptroller from the 6th wing, the way he described this to us when we first met with him is he said, the problem we have with the groups and the squadrons is everybody has their rank order of their UFR list. And to be able to reconcile the different ranks between the different groups or other units can be very challenging. And so what this does is it gives a criteria-based approach to that so that you're assessing these UFRs against the criteria and allowing for you to have apples to apples comparison across those different priorities, essentially. Let me pause there for just a minute and see what questions you have, if this is kind of making sense about the way that this is set up.
Yeah, the question I had maybe is the input to this. Is this done? Does everybody have access to individually go in there and put in their request amount, or is it like a gatekeeper type process?
Yeah, great question. You can set it up as a gatekeeper so that you give people no access, or maybe they have access, but only like contributor access. Or you can give people full rights into it, essentially. And the way let me describe how it's typically done, and then be interesting to get your take on how you would do this within your unit. So, for example, you might have the Delta II leadership team, or even just in the program office, maybe they would go in and you would ask them to weigh these criteria. And there's some exercises in doing that, but it can also be very simple. Like notice, for example, if I just want to change the weight to 25% and see how that changes the ranks, I can do that. Or you can have them go into an exercise and compare them to each other, which is more important, this or this, this or this. So typically a leadership team would, play in this role. And then for example, in a typical Air Force wing, you might have the resource advisors working with the units in the groups and the squadrons to go ahead and submit these UFRs and fill out the information for that. And I'll show you the form and the intake process for that here in a minute. But it can be done in a variety of ways so that you can get the data in the way that you need to and as seamless and efficient as possible.
And obviously the output ranking is a function of I see you put your weighted average and what's important on the left.
Yeah.
And then how does it calculate, I guess, one based on the impact of those, what's the priority, but what other inputs are there besides the item, the cost, of course? What
Yeah.
else are they inputting?
Yeah, so let me answer it simply right now, and then I will kind of ratchet up the complexity in a minute if you want to go more complex. But this is, let's just take this requirement: operations support GPC supply and equipment. You know, pretty standard.
Mm-hmm.
This is you, and you can actually see here in the ranking how this was assessed against these three requirements, or these three criteria, I should say. So basically, this value score that you're getting here is a normalized score between 0 and 1, but it's based on the assessment against these three criteria, and that's really all it is. Now you're layering in as the other variable the cost, as you mentioned. So you've got the value and the cost associated with it, and that's where you're getting, that's how you're getting your rank order. So these criteria could be any criteria, though. Like I said, they're configurable. So for example, you could have your lines of effort, but you could also have a criterion that says budget ability to execute, right? Or feasibility. Or you could have other types of criteria here if you wanted to. But essentially that value score is just based on the way that this requirement was assessed against the criteria, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Okay.
And you know, it can be pretty simple, or it can be more complex if you want it to be. The other thing I think Leslie mentioned earlier is Decision Lens is really designed to be a blend between quantitative and qualitative data if you want that. So you could have something as simple as a rank order, if that's all you have, you know, from the groups and squadrons, for example. Or you can have something a little bit more sophisticated where you have a set of a few criteria that that you're using. When we did this with the 10th Wing at Air Force Academy, it was really interesting. The wing staff leadership weighted the criteria, and then they took the UFR list, and they could only submit their top 5. So in fact, just to demonstrate, I can change this cut line, you know, to show, okay, here's your top 5 UFRs. And basically, or maybe I got 4 there, I can't count. But basically, oh, I hadn't, that's what that was going on, so I hadn't scrolled up. But basically, what was cool about it is they actually had the group leaders, the group commanders go in, and they quickly assessed their UFRs based on the lines of effort that they had. And then they came together and they discussed it. And then as they discuss it, you know, there's a little bit of an art to this as well, right? So they might have said, hey, this air control flight, we know that it's not above the cut line, or it's below the cut line, but we do want to move it above the cut line. And so that you can move things around, even though it's showing a different rank, you can move it around.
Oh, okay, got it.
Yeah, so you're seeing the rank, but you're also seeing how you can move things around to show it that way and move things above and below the cut line.
Okay.
So that's the prioritization component to this. And what's powerful about it is you can, you know, somebody mentioned COAs earlier, you can build different courses of action to say, well, what if we did our UFR funding or represented our UFR funding based on just this one particular criterion, equip air crews? And how does that look? And then now you've got your top 5 based on that, you know, or more. Or what if we looked at it from the perspective of enhancing aircrew training practices? And you can look at it that way. And you can see the delta shows how these 2 UFRs rose in the ranking in the 1 to N list pretty significantly, because they're adding significant value to this particular criterion, essentially. So it gives you all kinds of opportunities to do analytics in the decisions that you're making about your UFR prioritization. And that can be done by the groups, as well as, you know, at the Delta 2 level, at the, you know, the equivalent of the wing level, if that's the way that you operate, in addition to being submitted up to leadership.
Okay.
Any other questions about this particular piece?
Do you have any software that increases the chance of you for actually getting approved?
Yeah, that would be
any magic there. Software algorithm. That's our
no,
challenge.
well,
but no, this, you know, again, but to me, what's critical is the criteria, because we, you know, we have research, ops, installation, and then another MHPCC group. So they're pretty unique. So I could just imagine one is, you know, you say improve air crew, one, it could be improved or maybe decrease end of life risk to equipment. One could be, increased TRL, technology readiness level for research. Those are very different.
Yeah.
And I like the fact that if somebody came to us and we wanted to give you money just to decrease end of life, you put that to 100%, and those items will pop to the top quickly. If somebody said we're going to give you money just to increase your TRL readiness or mature your TRL, you decrease the end of life to 0 and put the TRL to the highest priority, and those will pop to the top. So I could see the value there.
Hey, this is Phil. Sorry, can you guys hear me? This is Major Yim. I'm driving right now, so sorry about the noise. But one of the things that I kind of noticed was, UFRs are typically, hopefully, tied to your, your annual or 5-year budget execution. And so I'm curious, maybe you don't have to answer right now, but how this UFR kind of dashboard and tool ties in at all to your annual execution, and how that flushes out comparatively to, where your requirements lie. Because I would imagine that, the criteria and everything else would tie, somewhat integrate into your, again, annual spend plan or annual execution. Over.
Yeah, I want to thank you for giving the perfect segue into the next part of the demo. So appreciate that. Thank you. I'll pay you later, right? I guess the question is, I don't know if you can see this though, if you're driving. So I'll try to describe it to you, and then of course, we could circle back if you'd like. But for everybody that can see it, what I want you to notice is this value score. I mentioned it before, that 0 to 1 list, the normalized value score of these projects. And the reason why I highlight that is because I want to now show you how that fits in with the overall annual spend and the way that looks. So what you're looking at now in this aspect of the software is, this is what we call our data studio. This is where you would pull together and aggregate a lot of the data. Can you all hear me?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, good. So that column that I mentioned on the value score fits in right here. And you can see that ranking, so it feeds this. So now from a requirements perspective, I'm looking at the value score of these particular requirements. And notice this, what I'm looking at here is, because of the status of backlog, this represents my UFR list. But what I want to see is, how does this fit within the overall set of requirements in my plan? Whether it's developing my X plan going into this, or if I'm in budget execution year and I'm tracking against spend plans, I'll show you that here in just a minute. And so you can notice there's a lot more data associated with this. And now that I've shown you the prioritization toolkit, I want to start to show you how this rounds out the overall aspects of this. You see your requirements here on the left. I've got a status here. And by the way, this is really interesting and important, I think, because rather than a snapshot in time static Excel-based list, what you're now starting to see is more of a living, breathing, centralized planning system of record, right? Where you have your list and it fits into that, but this is more dynamic in nature, where you're bringing people in collaboratively to go in and make updates, and they're doing it in a centralized system with a lot of other data and information that you have associated with each of these requirements, if that makes sense.
So Major, they're kind of showing the dashboard of baseline plan now, which includes scheduled, so executable plan stuff. If they switch it to from scheduled to backlog, that would mean sort of the UFR. I guess we could change that term, obviously. And then it's just showing a snapshot, like I guess almost real time, or as real time as you can get with people's inputs. So it's showing here start, and we get all that total request. What is the value score and risk? Describe that, or what does that mean for the value score at least?
Okay, great. So I'm going to describe it this way. I'm going to just pull up a framework that can be used in Decision Lens. And this goes to the earlier question I think Major Tabata might have asked, or Sean, maybe you had asked. But the value score described in the prioritization is just one dimension of this. Obviously there's a cost component to it as well with the requirement amount. But the other pieces are risk and balance. And so a risk score could be used or not if you choose not to. But that risk could represent any of a number of things. For example, it could represent the risk that you're taking on with doing this requirement. I know that risk is used in that kind of fashion a lot in the Air Force. It can be used as well as you're thinking about the feasibility or the ability to execute a project. So you have a lot of UFERs and you're pushing those forward, but then of course maybe there's some risk in being able to actually execute on those should those be chosen, or any requirements for that matter. The balance is really more of a representation of where your funding is going. So for example, if how is your balance in your funding across different units or offices or flights, or whatever those might look like, you could have a balance category for that. So let me go back to the projects and just show you what this allows you to do. Is it allows you to schedule and optimize your plan based on those different dimensions: the value, the risk, the balance, and then the cost here. And by the way, this may, you may say, well, we're just doing this on spreadsheets today. We don't even have any data about the risk or anything like that. And that's totally fine. You could begin just with a requirement and a cost as a starting point, and still bring the data in and do your planning that way and do your budgeting that way. But this allows for you to grow into some of these other data points that can help you going forward.
Okay.
So that's that piece of it. And the other thing I just want to mention before we go, what I'm really excited to show you is more of the spend plans and how you track spend plans in here. But before I do that, let me just show you quickly some of the collaboration features in the software to show why this could be more advantageous than using a spreadsheet or an Excel-based process. So I'm gonna drill down into this Y weapon system operations support. I'm gonna view the project details of this. And Major Yim, just to tell you where I'm at, because I know you can't see it, I'm now drilling down into just one of the requirements. What I'm looking at is a status, a start and end date of that requirement, and then a table that shows my my costs. And certain tags related to could be certain codes, the program element codes and things like that, as well as associated. And what's really nice about this is, let's say I'm trying to gather data on this. I could send a note to Katie and say, hey, Katie, can you please look at the costs on this particular piece? And so Katie can do that, and then she can add a response back and say, Jonathan, all done, right? So this would push to, if I mention her or she mentions me, it would push an email to me to let me know that that's done. And so now I'm building in collaboration capabilities into that. And the other thing that I have is I've got activity logs or audit logs of all the changes that have been made with respect to those this particular requirement over time. And so it allows for you to see what changes have been made and not have to worry about all the version control issues and the other challenges that a manual process sometimes tends to have.
So this would be for one project?
Yes, the example I'm showing is for one project. This is a drill down into one particular project.
Okay, I got it.
Yeah.
So for something like this, how do you capture like multiple stakeholders for multiple streams of funding?
Yes. Okay. So right. Let me answer the question on multiple stakeholders first, and then multiple streams of funding second, if that's okay with you. Those are great questions. So I can bring in multiple stakeholders. I just clicked on a participants icon in the upper right corner, Major Yim, and what I'm doing here is I can invite people in, and I can invite them in to see certain projects or all of the projects. I can have them as owners, or as you can see here, I can just invite them in as participants or contributors. And the way that I can set that up allows for me to build different permissions in for these different users for different projects. So you imagine a group or a squadron or similar unit, you just want them to have certain access to certain aspects of this. So let me just give you an example. I'm going to filter down by let's see, flying operations. and filter down that way, I can just have them have access to this particular, portion of it. But the other thing I can do is I can also request ideas. So for example, in the development of the X plan, or AFSOC, for example, uses this as they've been getting wings for their POM 23 process this last fall. Basically, they've created forms and in Decision Lens, and then you can, as a user, you can set up the form fields, and then you can share this form with other users, and so you can have them go into the form and then contribute into the form so that they're contributing data into this. So if you want, as you're developing your X plan or other things like that, you can just have them go in as contributors and contribute all the project data that you'd want them to contribute for that purpose as well. And that link you saw, I just copied the link and send it out, and you could give them certain access to be able to do that. Does that answer the question on the ability to bring users in and collaborate with them?
Well, no, I was more thinking about, so like a case example for us is that we might have a project that we have funded with AFRL 3600 funds, Space Force 3400 funds, and then 3600 from another SAF customer.
Yeah.
So I was just trying to see if there's a view to capture multiple stakeholder funding for one project.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah, I see. So it goes more to the stakeholder funding pools. Okay, yeah. So I appreciate that clarification. Let me explain that here and show you how the other wings have used that in the past. So now what you're looking at should look and feel a little bit similar to. Sorry, bear with me as my Outlook is giving me my next notification. This should maybe look and feel a little bit like a spend plan. I don't know how you do your spend plan tracking, today, but you can see you've got your budget amounts, and then you've got the requirements here and the plan start and end dates, and then, the request and allocated amounts for those over the course of months. To answer your question, you can build multiple funding pools here and to organize your budget funding pools here, and then to filter down by those funding pools. So I've only got one line item in this example as an FY21 requirements amount, but I can add in extra cost fields and then use those, like your 3400 and then your others as you're going down through this, and then organize your spend plans around those funding sources. So I think you mentioned earlier, you've got you've got the ones coming in from AFRL as one particular bucket of money for PPBE, but then you've got some other MOA funding or MOU, I should say, funding that's coming in, and you could set that up this way and then make those adjustments as you're going throughout time based on that, if that makes sense. Okay, copy that.
Yeah, hey, just to expound on what Major Spotto was saying, this is Major Yim. One of the things that, we constantly have to address is, what percentage of funds are going to a particular project and what stakeholder is paying for that particular set project. Because I think they feel some inequities because they're seeing a disproportionate amount of funds that are going to things that maybe they didn't agree to. So I think this would be an awesome tool to show, well, here's the cost of doing business here on Maui, and you need to contribute this amount. It may not be a perfect third, but it's going to show you the equitable amount that you're putting in, whether it's right, wrong, or indifferent. Over.
Yeah, great point, and I appreciate that comment. In fact, I'm going to steer away from this just momentarily and show you a way that you can look that in terms of a dashboard. So this is some of our other analytical capabilities. And notice I've got across the top some different plans or plan cards. So for example, I've got my COA 1 here and my U for list scenario and so forth. But what I wanted to show you as I scroll down to this is, if I go back to that balance field, this is showing the balance of my funding across different offices and units, but you do that across the different fields as well. So again, let me show it to you this way. You're looking here at budget across months, but imagine you're showing here a total budget availability amount and then multiple cost fields coming down the left side. So your 3400s and so forth, you can show it based on that. So you're seeing the amount of allocated funds across those different cost pools, or at least what you have in terms of your availability of funds across that, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. First, I have to actually go into the skiff now. But first of all, thank you very much for taking your time to brief us on this, and hopefully we can continue to work. I just wanted to, this is Major Yim. I just wanted to say, I think one of the things that we struggle with, and I'm sure you've heard as well, is another aspect of program management, which is requirements creep. And we constantly also have to deal with that in terms of, after we execute, like say the 21 spend plan or execution plan, there's a major change that occurs. And so I think this tool would help us kind of manage and also be able to display, once that happens, what happens to the overall, pool of funding, say, among the different stakeholders, and how does that impact other programs. And so I think this would be a great exercise, if possible, moving forward, to kind of take a use case or a subset of our requirements and actually use the software to kind of show how this might help us in the future. And anyway, that's kind of all I had to say before I have to leave. But really, thank you guys for taking the time. Over.
Yeah, thank you, sir. Appreciate that. And
Thanks, Major. We'll follow up.
Yeah. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I was just going to say just kind of the last thing, and I wish I could show you more, but for the sake of time, this is probably sufficient. There is a lot more capability in the software, but let me just show you this last thing as you're thinking about your spend plan tracking and to the Major's point about adjustments that need to be made. Imagine this battle staff aug project I've got here. It was going to be funded in November. It's not going to happen now. And now I need to move it to, the March timeframe, for example, right? And so hopefully you kind of saw how that works. Or, let's say it's not going to be funded at all. And so now I'm going to click down, like I showed you before, I'm going to click down into the project details from this page, and I'm going to put it in my backlog or on hold. And that's going to, basically take it off of the plan for right now. And then what I'm showing is, notice, these are showing where my funding amounts are across the months over the time period that I have. And you can see where some of those bottlenecks are in doing that. And I just want to highlight a couple of other use cases as we're kind of closing here. So everything that I've showed you, I've focused on U for prioritization and requirements gathering, and then, for the X plan, as well as, requirements creation and then the spend plans. But hopefully you can see, like if you were to do this with the facilities or a Milcon example, a lot of these same capabilities apply. For example, you can do your Milcon prioritization in the prioritization toolkit, and then you can run the budgets based on the spend plan here as well. One last example, the 316th wing has actually been doing this in some form of mission prioritization. The way they do that is they've taken the programs and the tasks within the different units, and then they've prioritized those programs and tasks here, and then they've figured out how to remove or get rid of some of the less valuable programs and tasks and sign waivers for those, so that they can focus on more of the mission activities that they need to do. And they use the major graded areas as their criteria for that as well. So that's just another use case to throw out there as a way to use this particular part of the software. I'm gonna conclude and turn it over to Leslie. I hope this was helpful to you, and that you were able to kind of at least get a taste of some of the capabilities.
No, I think that's great, John. I just have one question, very simple question. If you build the baseline plan, I think you call it the X plan, we call it the spend plan or the EP execution plan.
Yeah.
Does it what we're trying to get to is the reactive state. So we build the plan, stakeholders, projects, hundreds of lines of projects and funding sources. And we say we're going to get, say, SAF money on project X in January. And that's our baseline plan. What we're trying to do is have some kind of proactive tool, spit something out, say, Sean, SAF needs to send this money, you know, a trigger point, so that I can follow up with them versus be reactive and then having to deal with all the impacts. So is there any kind of way that you build the plan? I know nothing goes to plan, but assume there's no changes yet. Anything like proactive that can send out trigger alerts, visuals, you know, flashing red lights. That makes sense.
Yeah, I do understand. That's a great point. Currently in the capability today, it does not proactively trigger to you like need to contract or need to execute on that. But, you know, I will say this, that is a great point and something that we love to feed into the product development process. I mean, I think the good news about the timing right now for us is, as Leslie mentioned, we're in the SBIR phase 2. And so we're actually building out all this capability right now. So we could give that to you. And I'll just give you an example of something else that we're building right now real quick. Hopefully this will resonate with you, but this is, you know, this is a visual of obligation tracking chart that will come right out of the software to track the status of funds over time, you know, and you can see that by year and things like that. So we're actually in flight right now building a lot of this capability so it can do those kinds of things, you know, proactively to signal to you and let you know about those, you know, kinds of things that are going on.
Yeah, because if you put inputs in like contract mod is 45 days or 60 days or a MIFR is 20 days, whatever the typical processing time is, you put that in there and then you use it to back, you know, obviously back to where you should be starting. Then you could even put in, you know, add in 10% contingency because things happen. And then it gives you a you know, more realistic date. And then I'm just thinking forward, if you were to put data in as actuals, it could be able to update what you anticipated. If you put 10 days for something, and then over time you're doing it's really 13 days, we'll update that 10 days to 13 days. So it's long term, a lot more. Again, I think one of the conversations I had with Leslie was trying to make this tool, but also helps with continuity.
Yeah.
And so the third guy down the road has benefits from all the actuals, historicals, instead of, you know, putting the 10 days in and he has to learn the hard way. Oh, it's really 15 days.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. And part of our SBIR requirements actually includes building in the algorithms so that it makes it smarter based on the historical data that you have, just like you're explaining. So that is definitely something in the, you know, in the roadmap that we have that we're working on. Okay. So, by the way, turn it over to Leslie. I personally have a hard stop here at the hour, so you know, I apologize if I'm going to hop off here if you guys go over a couple of minutes, but I want to thank you for the time and turn it back over to Leslie.
Thanks, Jonathan.
Thank you, Jonathan.
Thanks, Jonathan. So we are wrapping up with a couple minutes to spare. I just wanted to just quickly, Major Tabata, Marvarine, Sean, I know Major Yim had to drop. Just any initial feedback in terms of what you saw today? Was this a valuable use of your time, and is it generating some ideas on how we might be able to further the conversation?
Yeah, I was particularly interested in the spend plan generation because right now, I don't know if Sean already talked you through this, but we use like a manual spreadsheet, and I mean it leaves a lot of room for error. But just looking at, you know, your application, I could see where, you know, we could basically, you know, avoid any error of, you know, whether it's input or whatever. And then it seems more flexible to change because, you know, if we have like, you know, something that the boss wants to do and he prioritizes that over what we had already planned, it takes a lot of manual inputs and changes to the spreadsheet, and it's just inefficient ways of doing business. But I could see a lot more efficiencies by, you know, using your product. But yeah, that's where I'd like to go a little further there.
Perfect. Yeah, we hear that pretty consistently. So thank you for that feedback. I'm glad that resonated. Maureen or Sean, any parting comments, and we can go ahead and conclude.
Yeah, I'll just
thank
follow
you
up.
very much.
oh.
Go ahead,
No,
Sean.
go ahead, Marty. Go ahead. No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah,
Go.
thank you. It was very informative, and it looks like a very useful tool, and it will save a lot of time. So I really appreciate you guys presenting that today. Thank you.
Perfect. Go ahead, Sean.
No, I was just gonna say I think Major Tabata's point is actually valid. The first criteria should be error-proof in our process. Period. So that's the one thing that even we're still struggling with that. So if this error proofs human error mistakes, or at least try to minimize, that's a huge plus just to start with. And then my thing is, like, we create these great plans. Can it be sort of not predictive, but forward thinking or looking to help us, because we're in the weeds essentially. And then lastly, just that whole COA exercise, and Major Yim brought it up because we're dealing with it, which I don't think unique to anywhere else, or unique to us, excuse me, that we have a plan, and we're about to get it approved, and now our customer has a new request, which is fine, we can satisfy, but we have to understand the impacts to everything else, and we don't really have that capability, or as much as we should right now. Something like that yeah, we can do that, customer, but let's go into this tool and show you quantified impact, and then have that discussion based on data, even just visuals, more than an email or a conversation, anything that can back up those meetings and decision points. And if the software, it increases that capability, oh man, it would be beneficial. So like the Major Bada said, yeah, we need to follow up, but so far what we've seen, I really appreciate the time and the effort on the demo.
Absolutely. Well, I know Jonathan has to drop, and we're at the top of the hour. I appreciate your time and your attention and your collaboration. Sean, I'll plan on, I presume, just following up directly with you on discussing next steps. And I will certainly get that. Yeah, I'll get that turned around you. But Jonathan, thank you. Thank you to the Delta 2 team. We appreciate your time, and we look forward to continuing the conversation.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, Leslie.
Have a great day. Take care. Thanks much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.